All right, the other bearded man on the screen is Regis. If you're not familiar with him, he's one of the biggest Marvel Snap content creators in the YouTube space and in general. He's posted a 41-minute video with the title "Let's Talk About Marvel Snap." So we're gonna watch this at least 1.5 speed. But I'm curious to see what he has to say because I personally can't think what I would talk about for 40 minutes. So I'm curious to see where we end up at and what his thoughts are. Let's take a listen together, shall we? Oh, or I could unmute the browser tab. Yep.
Of Marvel Snap. Is the game dying? Why are people so mad? What's going on with Kid Omega? Regis, what do you make out of all of this stuff? I've been asked all those questions and more like 1,000 times this week, and so many of you have asked me to make a video just, explaining where I'm at, how I feel about it, and so on. Which, if you go to my Twitter feed, you'll probably see a lot of thoughts already that are written out in a much more condensed and organized fashion. You're not going to get that today. This is going to be a ramble, a little bit of a rant. Probably some frustration will creep in. But
all right, that's why it's 40 minutes. Let's see. We might not watch the whole thing. We're gonna give it a good long shot, though.
Try my best to be organized. I wrote out this crazy long document with my thoughts for this video, so I have no idea how long this is going to take, but it really helped me organize and break this down a little bit. So that said, I'm just going to do my best to walk through this. I'm sure there will be some cuts and pauses as I explain things poorly and try to do it better, but I'm not gonna have any Subway Surfers running on the side. No Marvel Snap or whatever. This is just straightforward video. Just me talking to the camera felt like the most straightforward and honest way to do all this. But yeah, basically, I guess to start off with a little bit of a recap, right? Kid Omega comes out in the high voltage overdrive game mode. He costs a crap ton of in-game resources to get. It's more or less functionally impossible for a vast majority of players to ever earn the card through free-to-play mechanisms in the game mode. They're just, there's just aren't enough rewards, aren't enough missions and stuff to get it in a reasonable fashion.
I actually think this framing, and this is framing that's not exclusive to Regis, but I just want to make one thing really clear that I think is disingenuous about how a lot of the framing around this conversation has gone, is gold in Marvel Snap is a free-to-play resource. So you could have Marvel Snap as a Marvel Snap player, get a free-to-play resource to get Kid Omega. Now, it's a good amount of resources. Like, I think the amount of gold it takes is like a month's worth of gold and then some. But the problem, in my opinion, with the Kid Omega event is that limited time game modes in things like Marvel Snap should not take you time and additional in-game resources. So I think it's fine to be upset that it takes gold to get it, but the idea that you can't get it free to play isn't true. It's not like a season pass card where you have to spend money, right?
Even a crazy, it takes absurd dedication, I think, to get the card for free. I'm sure there will be people who do it, but it's going to be just the tippity top most elite players and stuff when it comes to win rate and time spent. It's just asking an unprecedented level of players to actually earn it for free. And if you want to buy it outright, it basically costs like $100+ to do it with like buying gold or whatever, which some people did right away. I did that right away as a creator. Other people will just skip the work altogether and just buy it outright, which $100 is just an absurd, unprecedented level for me for a digital card. I think that's just absolutely nuts. Marvel Snap, I always thought cards were already too expensive, and this just pushes it to a totally new level. This is basically just for the game itself, and really a lot of games, every other card game almost, I think from a digital aspect anyway, like an unprecedented price for an individual card, or like an unprecedented demand from an engagement standpoint, right? And that's why everybody reacted so poorly, right? It's just
it's super expensive, but I would just like to and this is one of the things about Marvel Snap's economy that I think does it a huge disservice, is Marvel Snap doesn't hide what it costs remotely at all, right? Like, it's really easy to look at Kid Omega and go, that's $100, which is outrageous. But just so we're clear, in the industry, it costs me over $80 to get a specific EX card in Pokemon Pocket with pack points. And in Magic Arena, it costs like $18 to get a Mythic wild card, and you need 4 of some Mythic. So a playset of a Mythic in Magic Arena is also in like the $70 to $80 range. So I want to make it very clear, I am not saying that this is an acceptable price. It's an outrageous amount of money. But I'm also saying it's kind of precedented in the gaming space. Those other games just do a better job of obscuring what they cost while being ridiculously expensive. So, again, I'm not telling you it's not expensive, but I am saying this is what happens in the gaming space, and the other games are just better about hiding it from you.
pushing things to a new level, asking more and more and more of players. And that made a lot of the player base snap and react really negatively on Reddit and Discord and everywhere else, where like a lot of people got mad, which frankly is not a new thing for Marvel Snap. This has happened numerous times. This might be a more extreme example, although I would argue I think Nexus events were worse. It's just that most of the player base wasn't here for that way back when, before the game like went wide with its release or whatever. I think Nexus events were worse because I remember spending like $250 to get two.
He's correct. For people that weren't familiar, Nexus events, it would cost you upwards of 400 USD to get specific cards. I can't emphasize this enough that every time Snap's iterated on their economy, it's gotten better and cheaper and more accessible, but this is awful, but Nexus events were like a nuclear level, and a lot of people have compared this to Nexus events, and it's not remotely comparable.
2 cards for Nexus events, which pushes that price at like 120, or it maybe even been like $300 for 2 cards. It was somewhere around there, I think, for Nexus events. So we've done this song and dance before, right? And I kind of honestly thought like every other time this has happened, Second Dinner always says like, ah, crap, okay, we pushed it too far, we screwed up, like we went too greedy with this or whatever. And they usually walk it back a little bit, right? It's like they push the envelope, the player base reacts, and they pull back on it, and they find a slightly healthier middle ground. Maybe still push too far from most perspectives, but usually they walk it back or offer some compensation. It's this little song and dance. We see this all the time in games where like game companies want to anchor the conversation in a really aggressive way, and then they require this pushback to kind of pull it back to a more reasonable level. They're just pushing their boundaries and stuff, and over time that kind of creeps up, into being really aggressive in the long run. But it usually takes a while, And sometimes you get big wins as a community. I think in Hearthstone numerous times actually it's been pushed really far, and then they pull it back into a healthier spot. And sometimes you actually can win when you have these sort of community outrage moments. And I don't know that we've ever got a big win in Marvel Snap, but we've usually pulled it back some. We've usually gotten some return. They've met us, if not quite halfway, 30% of the way or something, right? Like they've come back a little. But this time, Friday, when they put out a statement finally regarding all of this, late on a Friday afternoon, by the way, is when they put this out, which you could argue just because it took them that long to get it done, but that's also a time a lot of PR companies will try to hide things in the news cycle, like drop it right on Friday afternoon, at least in the US. And as people exit to the weekend or whatever, a lot of things will slip under the radar. So it might have just been a sneaky PR tactic. But they put out a statement that basically said, no, we're not walking it back this time. We actually think this is what we wanted to do. We achieved our goals. And they basically said like, hey, we just didn't set expectations well. So instead of saying like, yeah, we pushed it too far, they're like, we didn't warn you that we were going to push it this far, but this actually is what we want it to be. And that caught me off guard, right? That was like, oh, hey, wait a minute. This is the first time, at least for, I think, a major event, or at least first time I'm remembering anyway, where they didn't say, hey, crap, we screwed up. Like Nexus events, was the first big one. And they really said, hey, we screwed up, and they reworked everything.
He's super right. People were asking if I was going to react to their Friday announcement, and there really wasn't anything worth reacting to. They were just like, hey, this is what it is, and we're not changing anything. And that's just, And part of me's not super surprised by that, because short of just mailing everybody 50,000 volts, I feel like they probably need a patch to change things, and the event's like over in a day anyways, and they probably just didn't want to mail everybody 50,000 volts would be my understanding.
Still wasn't great, I don't think, as a result, but they even like make fun of it in the game and stuff, and they showed some real contrition around pushing things too far and asking too much of the player base. I thought that was going to happen again, maybe a little less over time, but I thought we were still doing that song and dance, and then it just didn't happen this time. And that just, man, that like took the wind out of my sails. That's why I put out like this big Twitter thing yesterday saying like, here's what I said. I said, I don't know what to say about Marvel Snap. I've tried really hard to give feedback and help Second Dinner find a path to players, try to give an ear and a voice to players and other creators, try to give the game its chance to shine for being so much fun despite all the frustration. I even gave to charity to hopefully infuse a tiny little bright spot into all this. I gave my Kid Omega revenue from that video to Child's Play, which is the charity that Penny Arcade started. Penny Arcade is friends of Snaps with all the variants and bundles and stuff. Guys who run packs and all that. Which I've been a big Penny Arcade fan for like 25 years. Child's Play has always been my charity of choice because my wife has been a nurse at a children's hospital.
He's right here. Oh, my brain is mush. What was this?
So much fun despite all the frustration. I even gave to charity to hopefully infuse a tiny little bright spot into all this. I gave my Kid Omega revenue from that video to Child's Play, which is a charity that Penny Arcade started. Penny Arcade is friends of Snaps with all the variants and bundles and stuff. Guys who run packs and all that. Which I've been a big Penny Arcade fan for like 25 years. Child's Play has always been my charity of choice because my wife...
Sorry, my brain just connected what I wanted to say earlier after I listened to him talk. He's offered to Second Dinner to talk to them before I give them feedback on stuff. I have an NDA with Second Dinner, and I've given them product feedback on stuff before. And it is such a baffling miss about this event that they're just not like, hey, Regis, hey, Jeff, hey, slew of other content creators we have NDAs with. Here's how this upcoming event's going to be structured. Are we going to be torched publicly for this, or is this remotely okay? And I think that's one of the biggest missteps about this. And like even if they were dead set on we're not changing this, the creators at a minimum would have given them, or I would have at a minimum given them feedback, hey, you need to let people know they're gonna need to have gold for this. Because if you want this to be something that free-to-plays are going to have access to with grinding, they're going to need to know that they're going to need gold. So like, even if they're dead set on we're launching like this and we're not changing it, getting feedback on how you should communicate to cushion the blow is important. Because like, they even missed a really obvious thing. Like, one of the things I called out in mine was the buying mission refreshes was less efficient than buying volts in the shop. And that honestly might be the most heinous part of this whole thing, is their economists that put this event together missed a detail like that. Like, that should just, like, there should just be a checklist of things you're going down when you create events in a game like this, and making sure that spending resources directly in the shop is less efficient than spending resources to then play to get more should be like numero uno on one of the checklists of things that you do. So it feels like that from a core design standpoint, they missed a really critical one there.
Has been a nurse at a children's hospital for 10 years. Currently not working with a baby, but for 10 years she was a nurse at a children's hospital. She loved when kids got games, and it just brought so much joy to them. Anyway, totally an aside. Go support Child's Play, though. That's one positive bright note we can take out of all this. But anyway, I continued. But the game just takes and takes and takes. The Snap team's message today indicates that it won't be changing, and I fear it might be getting even worse. I'm tired. I just want to have fun playing goofy decks for you all. I guess I'll keep doing that for a while. I'm sorry I can't do more right now. I tried. And that's still how I feel. I just feel like tired now. I always had this like glimmer of hope, this promise that like maybe it wasn't going to ever get a lot better, but maybe it wouldn't get that much worse. And this week it was like, they finally just said, hey, no, man, it's staying bad and it might get worse. And it's just really frustrating, dude. Like, I've been trying so hard behind the scenes. I write so many diatribes to the Marvel Snap team, often unacknowledged, sometimes acknowledged, but never actually really taken into consideration. You know, I've pushed and pushed and pushed. I try to be a really positive guy. I don't know if I really try to be. I think I am just a positive person. I don't even know if I really try. I just have fun playing video games. Usually that comes across on screen. But man, behind the scenes, I'm actually more of a shark sometimes. Like, I'm a lot more fierce from a business standpoint, from like I'm kind of a business guy behind the scenes, which most people never see, and I'm very direct and very, not rude, but very critical of Marvel Snap behind the scenes with other creators, with Marvel Snap themselves. It doesn't come across on video because I'm not talking about that. I'm just playing the game and having fun. I've really come at them so many times. Other creators will tell you, because they're in the Discord with me, seeing all the messages I write. I just write these like
I've talked with other people. Like, I don't really know Regis as a person. He's not someone I collab or talk to, but like, I've definitely pinged other people in the creator Discord before. But like, they don't deserve Regis. Like, he writes like, has written like blocks numerous times of like well thought out stuff, and he's right. And on a number of times, just like doesn't even get an emote reaction from anybody on the team. Hopefully they're seeing it, but you know, it's impossible to know.
Paragraph diatribes politely but like firmly, and it never goes anywhere. But anyway, you know, like, I've really tried, and this makes me want to give up on trying anymore. Like, I don't think I can impact change. I don't know what to do anymore. Like, I just don't think I don't think I have enough power or influence, despite probably being the at least the most popular YouTuber from a view standpoint anyway, like, you know, most influential theoretically from a reach standpoint or whatever that means, right? I just don't think they care about what I think, or at the very least don't. You know, maybe some people do. You know, I think there's probably people who care, and probably people who are trying to do the right thing within Second Dinner, and other people who aren't. You know, there's always clashes in these company environments. So maybe some people care, but I don't know, man. I'm tired. But anyway, the statement on Friday just really, I don't know, dude. It just made me sad. Like, it made me sad. We'll talk more about all of this. But here's why, right? Here's why I think it made me particularly sad, because they just promised this new era of Marvel Snap. Because we had the blip earlier this year where the United States banned TikTok temporarily, and because of Marvel Snap's connection to the parent company ByteDance, Marvel Snap also went offline for a little bit, right? And because of all that, they decided to step away from their publisher Nuverse, who's connected to ByteDance, and self-publish the game. And they tease, you know, this is a new era for Marvel Snap. We're taking over all these processes and all these things, and blah, 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 blah. The game's going to get so much better with this new era of Marvel Snap. And a lot of us, myself included, naively thought, oh, hey, maybe that's true. Maybe they won't push players so far or ask so much of players in this new era. You know, maybe for whatever reason, the publisher was pushing a lot of these more aggressive monetization and progression and engagement demands out of players, and maybe it'll pull back a little bit. But this is one of the first big things that's been implemented since the self-publishing switchover, and it pushed things even further. It does not feel like a new era of Snap, or if it does, it feels like a worse era of Snap so far. I could maybe try to convince myself like this pricing or this event or whatever was set up before the swap, but it's like, man, this is one of the first like big publicly facing things since the swap officially happened. It was within, I think, the last month or so when they like officially pulled all the plugs and stuff. If it was set up in the previous environment, perhaps they should have gone and adjusted it to match their new philosophy or their new plan or whatever. Either way, it's a problem, but I don't really believe that. That seems just too naive once again. I don't think I can be as naive anymore in regards to their intentions. So yeah, the new era thing is I just don't buy it, right? Like I think it was always Second Dinner who was pushing things so much and so aggressively and was making so much of the player base angry.
I would bet the monetization has always been a Second Dinner decision. And obviously it varies company to company and publisher to publisher, and like usually publishers expect you to make certain amounts of money or you pay them amounts, but usually core game decisions like that are being made by the actual devs. And publishers typically, again, I'm on a asterisk, typically varies relationship to relationship, but usually publishers are doing things like coordinating Twitch drops and managing sponsorships and adverts and stuff like that. I will say behind the scenes, we know for a fact that the person working on the Second Dinner, the Marvel Snap Academy, or at least the person at the very top of it, they changed the public facing person at a minimum. Previously, we had someone, I think their name was Stefan, if I recall correctly, had done like interviews and stuff in the past. And then I'm blanking on the new gentleman's name, but there was someone else that was doing interviews and like did the thing with like Binks and Nina and Guest. That was a different person at Second Dinner that said they're now in charge of the economy stuff. So that did definitely change hands at Second Dinner, who was in charge of that piece of the Snap pie, to my knowledge.
So yeah, I think I think the new era is the same era or maybe just worse, which again, that makes me so sad. I was like so hopeful there for just a brief moment. So perhaps what's like most alarming about this to me is that it feels like almost like Marvel Snap is kind of cashing out on the player base already. In other words, instead of investing in a growing, happy, less monetized perhaps, but growing and engaged and happy player base, they seem to be instead focusing on how can we extract as much revenue out of this player base as quickly as possible. And that's alarming because Second Dinner is still ultimately a very young.
I don't know that I agree with this. As someone who experienced Wizards of the Coast through their turn goodwill into cash at record pacing, I don't know that I'm going to watch all of this together. What is the next part? It's just business, more than a game. What can we do? I think in general, everything around this Kid Omega stuff has been largely blown out of proportion. And I've said this in a couple of response on other social media. Once is annoying, but it happens. Twice is a trend. We should get details on how Sanctum Sanctorum is going to be structured here soon. It launches on Thursday. And if in Sanctum Sanctorum you can't reasonably get the card for free, like, then it's a trend and it's problematic. But like, we're close to almost double-digit limited time game modes, right? And this is the first time it's happened where you takes a grind plus extra Sanctum Show, whatever. I always mess the name. You know what I'm talking about. Stop it, shit. And while this is obviously a huge miss, this Snap is dying. Snap is extracting revenue from their player base because they're trying to cash out and leave. Like, I really can't make it clear enough to people at home. If Second Dinner's goal is to cash out and just extract remaining value from the player base, they don't rework the economy this year. They don't. Like, if their goal is they've got one foot out the door and these servers are shutting down in a year or two after we extract the maximum amount of values from the player base, you let the spotlight caches ride and you ride off into the sunset as you're gonna turn the servers off. If I actually think one of the biggest problems, and this is this has actually always been a problem with the limited time game modes, but it was less of an issue when you could reasonably get the card by playing. I actually think one of the biggest issues these limited time game modes have is that there shouldn't be a window where the limited time game mode ends and when you can buy the card for tokens. When High Voltage Overdrive ends here tomorrow or the day after, whatever it is, no one can get Kid Omega, even if they wanted to spend money to get it, until it goes into the card pool for tokens in the middle of July. And I actually think that's one of the biggest issues with this system in general. There should never be a card released into Marvel Snap where it's completely inaccessible and unavailable for a window of time while people are playing with it. Yeah, and once upon a time, this was a problem with the Season Pass. It used to be that when the Season Pass ended, the Season Pass card didn't become available for tokens or whatever the resource was until a month later. So like Merlin, the Merlin season would end at the start of July, and then you wouldn't be able to buy Merlin for tokens until August. There was a month delay. And that was awful, and they changed it. They made it available for tokens right away once the next season start. And these limited time game mode cards need to have that same experience. There should never be a card added to the game where people have it and play it, and people who have resources or are willing to spend money wouldn't be able to get it like we have with these current cards. Like I should be able to buy Kid Omega for tokens the moment, or a stat pack or whatever, the moment this event ends. And it's problematic that we can't. All right, a few people in chat really want me to watch this, so I'm gonna crank it up to 2x here and see if it's comprehensible. But that's my thoughts on the. I think a lot of people are overreacting about this in general.
Company. And for these like early stage young companies, these startup companies, typically they tend to focus really heavily on user acquisition and user engagement. And they take those numbers and they say, hey, look, we've built something really popular. You know, people love it. They're engaging with it. It's growing. And they take those numbers and they leverage that into capital. They raise money, basically. You know, they get funding because people see a lot of potential in the product they've made. They're like, oh, this is very popular. Oh, it is growing. Oh, users are really engaged. And they're not really that worried about revenue typically this early on. They're writing initial investments to give them a runway so that they can spend this time building out users and engagement and acquisition to then, you know, take off and get more funding. Sometimes that is eventually something, you know, like an IPO, which I don't think it's anywhere close to an IPO right now by any means, but or just later series funding from venture capital. And speaking of which, Secondary actually just got, within the last year, they announced, or a little over a year ago, I think I saw it was in January, they got funded by Griffin Gaming Partners, which is a venture capital firm, for $100 million Series B investment. That was just a little over a year ago. I mean, I'm sure it was in the works before that, before the announcement and stuff, but they should not be burning through capital at a rate that $100 million has vanished, right? Like, they have grown really rapidly from an employee count standpoint, much faster than I thought or expected. I will also say they are very good about compensation and packages and employee support stuff, which all that's great. I mean, clearly I want employees to be supported well. They've scaled up really quickly from a company standpoint, right? So I was a little surprised that shift has already happened, where Marvel Snap feels like it's less about that early stage and more about that next stage where they seem to be trying to extract revenue from the player base at a higher rate.
Yeah, I think this is just blowing one single card out of proportion. I don't think this one event means that this is a shift that's happening. And I think even with this change, with how the economy changed with the addition to this, we're still better off than what we had with Spotlight caches before. And again, I really can't emphasize enough that they really stepped in it, and this whole thing was a mistake. But it's just over the top.
I'm not an expert in this. I'm not an expert in the financial world, so, you know, this is all casual interest for me. But, you know, I've always understood that venture capital was less interested in turning those revenue screws early. That was something we usually see in private equity firms. Private equity usually invests in more mature companies where they see actual revenue potential, and then they turn the screws really hard to milk a lot of that revenue potential out of those mature companies. It's not something we usually see with venture capital backed companies. They're looking for that really long-term growth potential for something to just blow up like crazy, often from like an IP standpoint.
If the player base doesn't say anything, won't it become a trend like you said? I actually want to tell you, and this is something a lot of people don't understand. While you giving public feedback matters to a degree, you know what matters infinitely more than your public feedback? How you behave. Which is why, rather than making a video like this, I didn't make a video like this. Part of the reason why is because I just said I'm not gonna engage with this and I'm not gonna buy the card. And I know Regis donated his money that his thing made, but if you go complain on every bit of social media and talk about how Snap is burning to the ground, but you still give them $100 worth of gold for the card, or you or you log in and play 3 times a day and grind it to high heaven, it doesn't matter that you went and complained because your actions spoke way louder than your words. And I get it. He's got kids to feed. I feel for him, but he donated the money anyways. So it's just like, why not just not do it? Like, they are 100% gonna look at this event and look at what happened, and if the numbers say the community is fine with this from a behavior standpoint, they'll do it again. And if the numbers say, oh, we didn't make money and people didn't engage with it and they don't like it because they didn't engage with it, then they're not going to bring it back with this way in the future. Your actions speak way louder than your words. It's just like all of the people. We've seen this with Magic the Gathering, friends. Like, I'm a longtime Magic player, for people who aren't familiar with my background. People constantly complain about Wizards of the Coast and they're greedy and they're all this stuff, and then they shovel money in and buy booster boxes that cost more than a PlayStation 5. And they just like complain, but then they keep opening their wallets. And your time is your wallet in games like this, right? Like, you logging in 3 times a day and playing High Voltage Overdrive is you giving it your stamp of approval, regardless of whether or not you're actually engaging, you're actually saying it's bad.
As well, where they maybe invested in IP. And maybe that's actually what's wrong with Marvel Snap, right? Maybe because Marvel Snap is tied to the Marvel license, ultimately, maybe from a venture capital standpoint, they just don't see as much value in Marvel Snap long term because they don't have the ownership over the IP. When we talk about IP, we need intellectual property. Think about like the difference between, like, the only example that came to mind immediately for me was like Angry Birds, right? Angry Birds still kind of floats around, but in its era was an incredibly popular mobile game. They owned the creators of Angry Birds owned the IP of Angry Birds, and then what did it become? Right, it became movies. You saw toys everywhere, phone cases, right? They start being able to expand the company far beyond the confines of just a video game, and the revenue potential just skyrockets because you're hitting so many different pockets there, making giant movies and stuff instead of and books and toys and everything, right? Secondary doesn't have access to that because ultimately Marvel Snap right now is just all Marvel. They don't own any of that stuff. The IP is not theirs. So I wonder if they've just already backburnered Marvel Snap, saying like, hey, look, we can keep this running. Maybe not quite maintenance mode, but kind of a soft maintenance mode where it's like, hey, this is not the path forward for our company. It was a great starting point. It got us to the races. Maybe it got us to that Series B funding, got us $100 million, but now it's like, it's just on the back burner.
This again, just like the actions don't follow with this. You don't rework the economy if you're gonna backburner the game and cash out.
We're focused on other things, and we know Secondary is already building out other games. We've seen it in their like hiring section on their website and stuff. They've talked about other games they're building out and so on, other projects and stuff. So a lot of the like brain trust in Marvel Snap, the Ben Rhodes and all these people who founded the company, already moved on to work on other stuff. It does kind of feel like now Marvel Snap is the sort of stepchild of Second Dinner, despite its popularity, despite its healthy player base, which that sucks. That sucks. It feels like to me that was too quick of a change for them. I feel like they had a little bit of a golden goose here, very popular game. They could have really leveraged this audience, this trust, this player base into a good head start on their next game. Whereas instead, I could see a lot of people being bitter towards Second Dinner, a lot of Burns players who might tank their next game. We have all these sort of like review campaigns and stuff now. People leave bad reviews, which, I think is warranted right now in Marvel Snap's case. Like, if you're frustrated by the game, having a bad experience, if it's not meeting your needs as a player, I think you're absolutely within your right to leave bad reviews. I think sometimes they're weaponized in worse ways and probably some ways I wouldn't agree with. But in this case, Marvel Snap particularly, I can see that. I can see a lot of people using that against their next game and review bombing and that sort of stuff, which I don't encourage. Like, play the game if you like it's good, leave good reviews. If you don't like it, it's bad, leave bad reviews. But don't do it just out of spite necessarily. But that can happen, right? Like, I think you risk that when you burn a player base. Like, your reputation is connected to that, which again, they probably don't care because the scale of the Reddit audience, the Discord audience, my YouTube audience, whatever, is just peanuts compared to the scale of what they're probably aiming for when you look at like an Angry Birds or a Clash of Clans type IP. They want to push to that crazy level, which we're not going to matter to them. We're just nothing in the scheme of that world. So to me, it's frustrating. Like, from a purely business standpoint, I don't know if I can say it's wrong or I would begrudge it. Like, it probably makes sense. It just feels like throwing us under the bus as a community a little bit, as a game. That's how I see it anyway. I don't know. I don't have any insights into behind the scenes here, but that's what it feels like to me. The new era of Marvel Snap, in essence, feels like we don't care about Marvel Snap anymore. It just got us going. Got the engine started on this airplane, and now we have some runway. We're gonna try to fly to the next crazy thing, right? Which, man, I don't know. That's really frustrating. I don't know. This is all speculation, but that's how it feels anyway. That's how I see it. That's how I see it shaking out. Which, I mean, I hope that means the game is at least supported and still gets content. And I don't think the game's actually gonna die, but I don't know that that's a good sign as far as like turning the screws on revenue. I think boy, that seems to be their model. They just maybe need to make sure it's sustainable, like it's a viable, self-sustaining organism at this stage. And if they're not using it for growth or investment, they just need to make sure it's it's solvent, I guess. And maybe the way they make it solvent is by charging $100 for cards, which. So I guess next up, I have this line here. It's just business. Why do players care that they've charged $100 for a card? Right? Like I've seen this sentiment a lot. Like, don't get mad at them. They're just trying to make money because they're a company, right? And like, yeah, I actually agree with you, right? I don't actually think it's a big like moral thing for me. I never use words like they're evil or whatever for charging $100 for a card. I guess I use the word greedy, which kind of has some values.
This feels like a position that a person might take after a pattern is. I agree, Mather. This is I might be inclined to agree with all of these feelings if we're 2 or definitely 3. Honestly, even 2. If we're 2 events in and like Sanctum Showdown's gonna cost you a giant pile of gold and all the time in the world to get the top thing, like I would be inclined to agree with this. But this feels very just knee-jerky
statement in it, but I don't actually really mean it that way from like a moral standpoint so much as like I think it's greedy from like a short term. It's greed in the short term as opposed to greed in the long term. That's what greedy means to me is like they're selling their future for their present, and that feels like a greedy choice as opposed to a smart choice to me. So like yeah, I agree with you that of course they're allowed to charge $100. If they want to charge, that's well within their right. They're a business, they can do that. But I'm not saying it's evil. I'm saying it's going to kill the game potentially. I'm saying that it drives players away. I'm not worried about whether it's evil or not. I'm worried about the health of the game. So a lot of people come in and say, like, don't you want them to make money, Regis? Don't you want to keep the lights on? Don't you want the game to be solvent? Of course, obviously. Like, duh, it's my job. I'm not arguing the game should give you everything for free always. That doesn't make any sense. I'm arguing that this pushed things so far and asked for so much now up front as opposed to over time that it burns people out. It pushes people away. It creates a breakpoint where people decide to leave the game because they think they're being disrespected. They think their time is disrespected because of all the engagement this mode demands, and they think their money is being disrespected because being charged $100 for a digital card. I think it's just asking too much of players. It's just Marvel Snap is trying to take. And I don't think players owe the company anything. I think every player should engage with the game to their own best interests. I don't think you have an obligation to support Second Dinner or Marvel Snap or whatever. Your obligation is to your fun and nothing more. I think, you know, you just want to have fun playing the video game. And if the game fails to deliver that amount of fun in an affordable or reasonable way for you, you don't owe them anything. You know, complain about it, leave a bad review, leave the game. I think that's how the relationship should work. It's transactional, right? Like, they have to be able to provide an experience that is worth it to you, or they fail as a game and company. And I don't think this experience is proving worth it to any player. Or, I mean, there are some, obviously. And by the way, I don't begrudge people for buying Kid Omega. If it's worth $100 to you, again, like, okay, do it, you know? I don't think you should have to be charged $100, though. That's where I stand. It's like, I think it's outrageous to charge you $100. I think you should be getting it far more affordably. And that
I'm way less generous than Regis here. And I think if you think what he's saying here and you think them doing events like this is the beginning of the end for Marvel Snap, you should absolutely have negative feeling towards people who are engaging with the system and sending the message loud and clear to Second Dinner that they should run events like this. Because again, you could say whatever you want, but when push comes to shove, the thing that matters is how did you actually engage and behave with it? And if you're worried that this is going to kill the game, I'm not even worried it's going to kill the game. And I chose not to engage with it just because I think it's bad for the game for events to be structured like this. So the largest message I can send is don't engage with it, and tell other people if you don't like it, don't engage with it.
That would, in turn, make the game much more sustainable long term because you have a healthier player base who would engage in a healthier way. I know that there are obviously monetization models that suggest otherwise. You know, we all know what whales drive mobile games, but I think there is a middle ground here somewhere that's just not being hit with a $100 card anyway. So yeah, anyway, they're allowed to sell a $100 card. I'm just telling you, it's going to drive tons of players away from the game. It might technically be worth it from a revenue standpoint, particularly in the short term. They may say, hey, look, guys, you know, we only lost however many players, but we made this amount of money, and that shakes out for us. I just don't think it's sustainable long term. I think it's, number one, really bad for people like me, of course. You know, like, obviously everything I say is sort of nested in this context of like, yeah, this is my career. On that note, you know, it's definitely always a part of the conversation for me, but I will actually be fine whatever happens to Marvel Snap. If Marvel Snap went offline tomorrow, I would suck. I'd be very sad about it, but it would not ruin my career. I actually have a healthy second channel, my Hearthstone channel, that could actually just support us. Like, particularly if I spend a little more time on it, I could still be in business. You know what I mean? Like tomorrow, if I needed to be. I wouldn't even have to make that many more videos. I've always lived very frugally. We live well below our means. I have a long runway. I would maybe have 5 or 10 years to figure things out, frankly. I have other projects I'm working on, which have a lot of potential upside to me, which I'd love to show you, by the way, but it's not time. It might not ever actually be time. But enough on that.
Feel that.
So, like, yes, of course I want Marvel Snap to survive. It's my, you know, it's my number one thing right now. It's my focus. It's a large part of my revenue. Like, obviously, like, I'm biased inherently, of course, right? Where was I going with this? That was all of it an aside for some argument here. I guess I'm saying I'm not just looking out for my own interest here. You know, it's still about the interest of the players too, and the viewers and the people that I represent, right? Like, I want to look out for all of you to have a good, fun, healthy relationship with this video game. And I don't think Marvel Snap is serving you well, right? And I think ultimately that's going to be bad for the video game. I want Marvel Snap to stay in business. That's why I am constantly telling them, hey, this is not sustainable. This is not viable for a majority of players. Because what's eventually going to happen if they keep doing this is they're going to keep extracting value out of those top percent that are willing to do it, right? The people who are willing to spend $100 on Kid Omega, whatever it is, top 5%, top 3%, whatever, right? And it's going to make sense in the short term, but it's just going to continually erode the rest of the player base and erode and erode and erode. And what we know is that these whales, they need guppies to play against, right? They need people at the bottom to feed into that system. It's not satisfying to play.
All right, I'm gonna give the most blazing take I could give on this whole thing. All right, get ready for the clips. You're ready to flame me on Reddit for this one, I think. If Kid Omega is like, if the Kid Omega situation is like the reason like you're done with Marvel Snap, you are probably almost already done with Marvel Snap. Way too many people have deeply unhealthy relationships with games like Marvel Snap, and they keep playing them well past a point where they're having fun. And you not getting a card that's going to be fringe playable in a B+ tier deck, like, unless you are like, I live to play Nimrod, you don't need Kid Omega. It's a Nimrod card, right? Like, think of how many cards you have in your Marvel Snap collection that you never play. That you bought them and you were like, nah, this just doesn't vibe with me. It doesn't go in decks that I enjoy. Or how many cards you looked at them and you saw me play them or you saw Regis play them, you're like, that only goes in decks I don't like playing. There's no reason for me to get this. Like there's so many cards, and it's just one more. And that's why this is such an overreaction to one card. It's crystallized FOMO is a great way to put it. It's like if this was happening every single limited time event, it becomes problematic. But this is one limited time event out of double-digit limited time events, and we'll see where it goes. But I've said this a lot. You know what the number one thing you can do to enjoy Marvel Snap more is play other video games. Anytime all of your enjoyment is in one basket, whether it's only Marvel Snap or only Pokemon Pocket or only Shadowverse or only anything else, and that game makes one bad decision or has a bad metagame or balance patch or whatever, having all of your joy in a single basket is one of the worst things you could do. And it doesn't even have to be another video game. You could make a point to read books or watch a TV series or something else. Just make sure the ways you have fun aren't all in on one thing that you're expecting to always be fun, because it's never going to always be fun. It's always going to hit a moment where eventually where it's just not good. And if you have all your joy in this one place and then it becomes not good, you become very bitter and the sky is falling and the game is dying because one bad decision happened.
Play your shiny Kid Omega and just beat bots all day. You need players. You need to show off all this stuff to real human beings. And if the game erodes and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, eventually the whales are going to leave too and find greener pastures. They have the funds and the revenue to leave and find a new game and instantly commit and invest. They don't actually have as much loyalty always into a game because they have a lot of freedom to move on. Like, yeah, they've invested a lot. At the same time, it's, you know, sometimes functionally less commitment because they just know they can sort of do it again in another world. And, you know, beyond that, like, Snap is really more than just like a game. Like there's this sort of, you know, consumer product business aspect to all of this, which is often logically how I look at a lot of this, but I can tell while you know, discussing all of this. And I sort of think about the relationships between consumer products and stuff very often, but it's Snap is actually so much more than that if I really think about it, you know, and not to sound like too, I don't know, philosophical or like silly or I don't know, dramatic or whatever, but like it is really a community of people now, you know, over the last few years. There's so many like friends made and like Discord groups and alliances where people take it seriously and like friends who just engage in real life with the game with each other and like share off their decks and like people love sharing off their cosmetics and stuff and their borders, which I will acknowledge, like, I don't really engage much in any of that, you know, maybe with other creators to some extent. I'm kind of a loner anyway. So to me, you know, it's kind of just a game and a job sometimes, very fun one. But I don't even engage in the community stuff, but it's out there. I see it all the time. It's actually really cool. I'm like sort of jealous sometimes of all that like community that people have. And on that note too, it's commitment, right? Like so many people have spent so much time and money and thought and excitement and planning into building out these like Marvel Snap collections, not just buying cards.
And this is a really good point that doesn't come up often enough. People talk about how much they're invested in the game. And usually people focus on, when people talk about I'm invested in the game, they talk about the money that they've put into it. But investment in live service games like Marvel Snap isn't just your money. You invest hours and days and weeks worth of time eventually, right? And that's what keeps so many people who need a break playing the game more, is because they're like, oh, I'm invested. If I take a break, my investment was worthwhile. And the way you need to be able to look at these games is you are spending your time and your money to get joy while it's bringing you joy. And when it's not bringing you joy, you need to take a break or play it in a different way or play it more casually, etc., etc. The sunk cost is not just your dollars. The sunk cost is also your time.
To play with, you know, all the cosmetics, all the variants, all the splits, all this stuff. It's this little world for people, and it's an escape from the world as well. You know, it's a great way to get away from real life sometimes. You know, you have this little portal on your phone that brings you some joy and some happiness and some beautiful shiny colors and some cool artwork and some friends. And I guess I want to protect that to some extent. You know, it's sad to me that it does often just boil down to business decisions, and so much of what probably Marvel Snap is doing behind the scenes is just thinking about things from a business standpoint, which, yeah, it's a business, I get it, but it's also kind of sad that it feels like they're willing to maybe just throw all this away, all this just honest, earnest engagement and passion and excitement for the game in exchange for, you know, $100 card or whatever. So in some ways, if I thought, hey, the game needs this to be solvent, you know, like, hey, they are literally going to go out of business if they don't sell Kid Omega for $100, I think I would be more okay with it, right? I'd be like, okay, look, they're just protecting people's investments. It sucks. Like, I'm sure they could have done it more efficiently. They could have had a smaller team. There's so many things they could have done. But I think I'd be more sympathetic to it, right? I don't believe that. They just got $100 million in investment a year ago, like a year and a half ago, whatever, right? I don't think they burned through $100 million a year. They probably burned through a lot of it, to be honest, with the size of the team and the compensation packages and stuff. I'm sure they burned through a lot of it, honestly. But I don't think they need to sell a $100 card to be solvent or to even perhaps be profitable. But, you know, I'm not going to get back to the business side of it too much. So, I don't know. I guess that's why I care. I guess that's why, like, you know, people say, why do you care? It's a business. If they want to sell a card for $100, why can't they? They can, but that's why I care about it. Like, I worry it's going to drive people away from the game. I worry it's going to burn people out. I worry it's going to make people regret the time and the fun and the passion and the commitment they've invested in Marvel Snap. I think that sucks. That's why I care. I think that's why it's bad. I think that's why it's annoying. Like, I think all these little things and medium-sized things and occasionally big things, I mean, I think they really add up to sour people's relationship with the game. And I will say, like, you know, I've been doing this for 10 years. We've seen this time and time again in Marvel Snap and in Hearthstone, you know, for the games I've played. to give it some context, like Hearthstone had some moments that were much worse. Hearthstone had some like actual real life sucky stuff, like the giant sexual harassment lawsuit. There were like really, really awful, miserable things in Hearthstone we had to talk about and overcome. And this is just a $100 card at the end of the day. So yes, the stakes kind of feel lower in some ways, but I do still think it's important. I still think it matters. And I think it's scary that this could push people away from the game and could inevitably and eventually, hurt Marvel Snap's long-term potential to be something people love. So, yeah, I don't know. On that note, I guess, what can we do from here? I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Just like to give Second Dinner props, because they are a small company where it's due. Him talking about the stuff that was crappy at Blizzard past the actual gaming sphere. Well, obviously, I don't know everything that goes on at Second Dinner. I'm sure they're not perfect in every way. Just like give you insights into the type of good human beings that I know that work at Second Dinner from just seeing their actions. Brode left Twitter because of all the transphobia there, because trans rights are human rights, and he put his money where his mouth is and moved to a platform that has less reach because of all of the bigotry that happens on the Nazi site. And then even on the Nazi site, the community manager for Marvel Snap, Griffin, I follow his personal account. That man was duking it out with fascists the other day on the Nazi site. So, props to him. Good people with good policies. You love to see it. But all of my interfacings with the actual people from Second Dinner on an actual human level have been very reasonable in the years I've been working with Snap. And that's, to the credit, like, I'm someone who doesn't, when I worked with Wizards of the Coast, they wouldn't work with me because of my desire to tell certain types of people to fuck off and be polarizing. And Second Dinner still throws me bones periodically. They're all right with that. So.
No anymore. As I mentioned, I've tried so hard to communicate with the Marvel Snap team to level the game in a way that's healthy for players. And it's not just me, tons of other creators have been standing up for you guys too. I've seen almost no creators, not go to bat for the players. There are sometimes people going more to bat for Second Dinner, which it's fine to have some devil's advocates here and there, right? But pretty much everybody always is really standing up for you guys, which is cool to see. But it hasn't gotten us anywhere, and I honestly don't really see that changing. I've talked about before, like, I just don't have a great relationship with Second Dinner at all. I, for years, basically didn't talk to anybody. I would just leave these long blind messages in a Discord group, and they wouldn't get acknowledged that anybody ever saw them. Other creators would acknowledge it. They were like, yes, Regis, thank you. You're saying great things. I was like, yes, cool, I said something great. But nobody from Second Dinner would really ever acknowledge it. I guess it's gotten a little better lately. Like, I'll get a little smiley face or something on it, or a little note that it was seen or something, but it never really seemed like it made an impact or anything, at least not notably or visibly to us. So I don't really think that got me anywhere. I've been vocal on it publicly as well. You guys know I've made these sorts of videos every once in a while when something like this pops up, just talking about how much it sucks, how annoying it is. I mean, I was like the first person who came out and said this game is outrageously priced in a video anyway. Like I made that video. I spent $2,700 to get every card in Marvel Snap, which that was years ago, so God knows it's much more now. But it was kind of a big stand. I think probably got me some hate from Second Dinner a little bit. I don't know if that's true, but it feels like
$2,700 laughs in Pokemon Pocket Cosmetics and his nearly fully gold Marvel Snap collection. Imagine only spending $2,700 on Marvel Snap.
I haven't really worked with Second Dinner ever over the last year or two. So I don't know. Sometimes you think speaking out, costs you opportunities or whatever. I don't know if that's totally true. I think some people have gotten opportunities that were also vocal about bad things. That said, I was actually in conversations with Marvel Snap to do a thing, like to do an official Marvel Snap thing. We were literally in the final negotiations to do a thing. And this week I turned him down. I just didn't feel right about being an official representative of the game right now. I told him to cancel the thing. We're not doing it. I don't know if it's totally gonna go through anyway, but I just didn't feel right. So now I flipped the script. I don't know. So listen, I don't know what to do. I've seen people like asking for boycotts and stuff of Kid Omega or otherwise, like not buying the season pass or whatever. I think that's really noble. I think that's really cool. Trying to speak with your wallet. I'm not confident it's going to move the needle for Second Dinner. I hope I'm wrong. I don't want to discourage that because I think it's really cool to do. But I think unfortunately most of the people who are mad and like most people we see on Discord and Reddit and YouTube comments and stuff, I think they're mostly free to play players or light spenders anyway, and most of them changing their behavior or continuing to not spend is not actually something that moves the needle or is particularly noticeable. I think you'd have to like kill the whale spending, the very, very top end. I just don't think they're likely to do that. I'm sure there'll be some, again, greatly appreciated, very noble to stop spending. I think probably most whales liked that Kid Omega was expensive and good because it made it more exclusive and it gave them a chance to win a little extra. I think they probably enjoyed benefiting from the pay to win aspect of Kid Omega, which I don't actually begrudge them for that either, honestly. Like, yes, it would be super cool if they didn't buy it and made a statement. Like, obviously that would be super cool, but I also can't be mad at them for it. They're not the ones pricing the card at $100, If it's within their means,
Now, Regis, you can be mad at them for it. It's okay. If you actually want things to be better and not have $100 cards, you need to not buy the $100 card. I think whenever people call these types of games pay to win, I think it's very silly. I think it's extra silly, especially in a game like Marvel Snap, where the Snap team very carefully makes sure that older cards stay competitive. There's basically always decks full of piles of older cards, and like the newer shiny things get more play because they're new and shiny, but like to truly be competitive and hit goals, like too much of the pay to win aspect really is just people who are sad they can't have the shiny new thing. And I think it's fine to be sad you don't have every shiny new thing, but I think it's also misrepresenting what's going on, that acting like you have to have it to win, because that's not true. I think those people would be more genuine and would have a bigger impact if they would call a spade and be like, I'm sad I can't have every shiny new thing, rather than saying it's pay to win.
I think it's okay for them to do it. I know some of you disagree with that, and some of you think that they should boycott it. And again, I think that'd be awesome if they did. I would encourage that, but I also can't be mad at them for engaging in the system as it was made. I think I've actually seen a lot of people blaming the wrong people, getting mad at other players, getting mad at streamers. I think you should just direct all of that energy to Second Dinner, right? They're the ones who created all this. They're the ones who put us in this world. How people interact with the really shitty systems that Second Dinner made. I'm not going to begrudge people for that or hold it against them. I'm going to hold the really shitty systems that were made. That's what I'm taking to task here. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's some boycotts and stuff. I hope Second Dinner sees the light of day. But honestly, I suspect Kid Omega was considered a success by Second Dinner. I bet they made money, and I bet they're really happy about it. And that's why when the statement came out Friday, they just weren't walking it back. I think if it had failed, if they saw the numbers shake out, like, oh, we're losing too many players, oh, people aren't supporting it, I think they would have had the same contrition they normally do. But what I think happened is like, oh crap, that worked. We made some money, and I think we're screwed. I think that's what happened. I think it just worked, which I don't know. I don't know what to do about that, guys. So I do feel defeated a little bit. I feel like I was helpless. I don't know what's left. I think we just have to try to make as much fun out of it as we can. Like, if you still enjoy playing the game, if you still have some fun in it, I think that's great. I think I will try my best to do the same. I think there's probably still a lot of fun to be had in Marvel Snap. I think there are just going to be moments that suck, and we're going to be frustrated. And I think there are going to be other people who don't have any fun left in Marvel Snap. And I think that's also completely reasonable. I totally understand why you would feel burned or disrespected or pushed too far. And if you want to leave the game or stop watching me or whatever, like, I totally get it. I cannot begrudge you at all.
Yeah, I think well, and so V3, I think they hammered on that in the post that they said. It's crazy how much they changed this game mode in Chuldo. And I think that was a big part of it too. And they acknowledged that in their response on Friday, like, we didn't they had set expectations like double digits into this, that you can play the limited game mode and get the top reward just from playing. And I heard some other people mention that too, that if they had known they were going to need to spend gold to get Kid Omega, they would have skipped the Hydra Bob bundle. They spent their gold, they plan out their gold carefully and their resources as a low spender or free to play player, and their resources were now spent wrong because Second Dinner didn't tell people that the structure was going to be different. And I think that's the most valid, reasonable critique of this, is that if they were going to do that, I think they shouldn't have done it. But if they were going to do it, they should have communicated to people that this was going to be the expectation, because gold is a free-to-play resource, and you can get Kid Omega without spending any money, but you are absolutely going to need to allot your resources accordingly. And people made decisions under the reasonable presumption that the limited time game modes would continue to be structured in the way the last dozen had been structured. And I think that's a fine takeaway, is that they needed to communicate that in advance. All right, so again, to Jeff's takeaways on this event, that this is why I didn't make a dedicated video and we're reacting. I think the structure was bad, and I think not communicating it into it in advance made it worse. I think one of the biggest misses about all of these limited time game modes, not just this latest one, is that there should absolutely not be a gap between when the event ends and when you can buy the card for tokens / in snap packs. It's completely unacceptable that Kid Omega leaves High Voltage Overdrive this week and then it's not available until the middle of July for other people to get, whether it's buying it in a bundle or buying it for tokens or buying it for gold. There should literally never be a card that's released in Marvel Snap that's not currently available to be acquired in some way. And this isn't new to the Kid Omega card and this event. All the events have had this delay. It's just past events, this delay was less of a big deal because you could reasonably get the card inside of the event by playing it, so it didn't really get brought up. I've also pointedly provided this feedback to a contact at Second Dinner who was like, oh, yeah, you're right. That probably shouldn't be that way. So obviously that's not a promise that it's going to change in the future, but I have directly sent the feedback, hey, there should never be a card that's in the game and not available for purchase or acquiring in some way. I think once is not a data point. Once is not a trend. If the next limited time game mode or the one after this one is structured in the same way as this, then it's problematic and it's something that we should be concerned about. But I think all of the Marvel Snap is dying and I'm leaving the game because of this and all this other over the top hyperbole, I think it's very silly. I think it's fine to to be critical and talk about how they stepped in it with this, but the idea that every single event is going to be like this is not something that we've seen. We're going to find out the details on Sanctum soon, and maybe I'm going to be saying something very different if those details match this Kid Omega event, but I'm going to wait and see. And I know that wait and see doesn't generate clicks, and it doesn't get people mad, and it won't make me money, but that's the reasonable thing to do, so I'm going to do it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm going to link Regis's video down below. I'm going to post this whole segment. If you're watching this on the Hoaglandia Stamp channel, I'm linking Regis's video in the comments down below if you want to give him some watch time and a thumbs up as well. Thanks for making it all the way through to the end of this, which ended up being very long. We'll see if people actually watch this, but I did it. I talked about it. We might as well send it up.